Yes.
Interview with Professor Karsten Fledelius, Part 2, with beer. Karsten, before we come back to the subject of the formation of IAMHIST,
yes,
can I just ask you this story? You just mentioned to me about meeting Albert Speer
yes,
at the conference at Göttingen in 1973.
Yes.
What was that like? Can you tell us about that?
Well, that was a fantastic experience. The background was that we were working very much with films like Triumph of the Will and The Eternal Jew and other of the big German propaganda films. And particularly Triumph of the Will was a major subject of Per Nørgaard, Kåre Jørgensen and I. We worked for it for years in order to go deep into each shot. We found out in which way Lene Riefenstahl had actually manipulated with all her film material, mixed opening of the Congress with closing of the Congress, and we were particularly interested in those party leader speeches of which they are given quotations in the film. And we wanted to ask Speer particularly about that. And that was, we tried to contact Speer, but then eventually he came to Göttingen because he would come there, invited by the Institut für die wissenschaftlichen Film, in order to be interviewed by a journalist from Israel. And Speer was, well, I asked him, why do you do this? And said, well, now I'm a free man. I am at his disposal for research. I have been responsible for taking part in Hitler's venture. I have paid my price for it, but I think I have an obligation for posterity to tell what I know. And I was asking him several things. One of the questions was, how could you actually preserve sanity, mental sanity? Hess got more or less mad. You didn't. Why? And then he said, well, that was because I walked to Constantinople. He had a discipline which consisted in that every day in Spandau he counted out how many steps he took when he was walking, both in his cell and in the outside. And then he figured out where he would be on his way from Berlin to Istanbul. Figuring out what happened on his way. And in this way he kept a very strict record, and he should walk 7 kilometers per day. And if there was one day where he didn't feel comfortable, he would then walk more the next day in order to keep up with his marks. Very curious. He seemed to be a very controlled, very disciplined person. The other thing I asked him about was how he could, what his impression was of Hitler, how he, as this civilized man he in every way appeared as, how he could actually fall for a man like Hitler. And when he said, well, I thought over it myself. He appeared as a very kind man, even emphatic. And he treated me like that artist, that son he never had. And I remember when we were approaching the end, and where Hitler gave the order that I should managed that everything was destroyed, that nobody would have any use of Germany after his empire had broken down. And when he then said he didn't do it, he had expected that he had been liquidated by Hitler, but Hitler didn't liquidate him. Of course, I know that there is a lot of debate about, or people who have written about the sincerity of Albert Speer. And it may be that I've also been mesmerized by this very imposing figure, a high man, very precisely speaking like he was writing all the time. The most beautiful, clear language. But in some way, I think that we have to understand, and therefore I like the film Die Untergang, because the way Bruno Ganz embodies Hitler is similar to, I worked very much with Hitler through my life, read most of what he has written, listened to all of his speeches, seen all of his speeches, which have been accessible for me. And I understand how dangerous that man was. And every time when people appear today on the screen or in reality, and they give some of these impressions, I feel alert, because it is a win within ourselves. You could say the devil is in the detail, but you could also say the devil is in each person and can take command and take command of others. And what has struck me, and that was also what Speer said to me, he always appeared so sincere. And if you go with that clue and look at his speeches, there are a couple of moments in Triumph of the Will where you can see he's enjoying himself. And Lene Riefenstahl catches it. Lene Riefenstahl, another person who is, I think, much more dubious than Albert Speer in my feeling. But anyway, Lene Riefenstahl was also a great artist. And she catches and delivers moments where Hitler actually opens something where you see the triumph, where he's enjoying himself and doing it in a way where you think, oh, here he's dangerous. And the interesting thing is that Hitler didn't ask for cutting any frame in Riefenstahl's portrait. He just delivered himself to her. Therefore, I also think film as a source. If you take Triumph of the World, of course, we have been able to investigate it very thoroughly. We have been through every single shot and seen it in connection with the previous shot, the following shot, and compared it with the music, we tried to work against the seduction coming out of that film, but at the same time analyzing that seduction. And in some way, even it is a sort of documentary where you have some sort of arranged reality in many ways. What comes out of it is a document of Nazi ideology, which is very, very important, and we would not have it without the sound film. And when I say the sound film, it is very important because the music is so important part of film. And Norbert Wind, I think it's Norbert Wind who made the music. That is a Wagnerian score. That is high German late romantic music, which is underscoring the film in the most congenial way. It is something which could be compared, even if I would say that here we are a level higher, with the film Alexander Nevsky by Sergei Eisenstein, with Sergei Prokofiev as the composer, the film composer. We have tended to neglect the importance of film music. There's been a change in this lately, curiously enough, in the Danish radio. Some of the new music programs now concentrate on film music. It's very, very interesting, and I'm so glad it's done, because film has contributed so much to music and to the development of music. And one of my favorite composers is Dmitri Chomkin. Few people will know his name, but he was the one who made the music for the brilliant American Why We Fight series, with a leitmotif technique which was in its inspiration totally Wagnerian. That was Wagner's techniques used against the nation of Wagner, so to speak. So in this way, the silent film was not silent, we know that. And the silent film had also its scores, sometimes prepared scores. There were music made, live, played with orchestras, or with piano players. But the total synchronization on single frame level, on single sound level, between sound and music was not possible before the sound film. And therefore I see the sound film as a medium as fantastic and as syncretistic as the opera. Because the opera also works with this combination of image, word and music.
The subject of film as a historical source brings us back to the foundation of IAMHIST.
Yes.
And you were one of the founding members
Yes.
of the association. You were there at the meeting which drew up the constitution. And,
Yes.
and so, can you tell us something about that? The formation of the group.
Yes. Well, the Brandberg meeting, which was, I remember that still, and what I remember most from that conference, that was when we had most of the work done in the sections. Then we had an open-end meeting, and at that time, video recorders were very heavy and normally not used. We are in 75, so everything was on 16 millimeter film, and we had our Bernard Howell's projector standing. I think we had 6 or so standing in various rooms and having a program. People signed up what they wanted to see. They had seen clips from that and that. Now they could have the possibility of seeing the whole film. Simply making a list, and then in these separate rooms, films were going on until there were no more wanted to see it. And I remember when we started this, some of us who had seen most of the films beforehand, and who were perhaps a little tired because of the planning and the arrangement, sat down with our beers in the yard of this folk high school, Brandberg. This Brandberg High School was actually like a big farmhouse with 4 wings, and in the middle there was a wonderful combination of yard and garden. And there we were sitting, there were an outside grill, and I was sitting among other together with Clive Kutas from the Imperial War Museum, and we are sitting and toasting with the beers, and feeling so well. And we could hear from all these rooms the films going on, various films going on, this activity, and then we were sitting in the middle of it. I felt so happy. And out of this atmosphere, we said, we have to continue this. We have to bring it on. But how do we have to create an organization? And the first thing we said is, we must have the backing of the International Committee of Historians. We must have a recognition of this field. It was not until, it was mentioned, I think, at a historical congress in 1927 or 29. But it was not made a methodological main theme until in 1985 at the Stuttgart conference, and there I had the honor of being the one who organized that section or methodological main theme at the historical congress. I could say that that was my last big duty as the president of IAMHIST, which I was from 79 to 85, actually to convey this coming out into the fore, into the public, and presenting the methodology of film and history as an important part of historical sciences. So that, but because we all knew how neglected film was. These colleagues of mine who said, well, it's all sang et lumière, and not taking this seriously. There were some historians, some of those who were a bit advanced, who saw it, but they didn't have the methodology. What we embarked on was to develop a methodology together with our colleagues in several other countries. And at that time we had a certain skepticism to the American approach, because the Americans were much more concentrated on the narrative and not putting the same clear distinctions between fact and fiction. Whereas we, in our particular medievalist founded tradition, looked very much at authenticity, documentation, and so on. So that was what we wanted to bring in, that it matters, and that you have to see film and history as a very, very important part of modern history research, which should be taken more than seriously, because it has been so influential in the molding of the masses to reality. How to actually learn, teach people to protect themselves from the lies coming from the audiovisual media. That was one of our great ideas.
I understand there's a lot of time spent discussing the Constitution and even debates over what the name of the organisation is.
Oh, that was really funny. We ended up with the impossible name, International Association for Audiovisual Media in Historical Research and Education. Well, and we abbreviated IAMHIST or IAMHIST, how you pronounce it, and the acronym was actually very easy to use, except for the question whether you should say IAMHIST or IAMHIST. Never mind. But as later we have abbreviated it to the Historical Association for History and Media.
So the acronym was actually invented before the name was agreed.
Exactly. And then the new name had to be covered by the acronym. And we also made the first logo made was this one. Oh no, it is not there. I think it is here in one of these other documents, the newsletter. Yes, here that was Henrik Andreas Hens, who is also still living, who made this, which of course shows how much it was. Well, this was both a film roll and a video recorder roll, both things, and a tape recorder roll. That was the idea. So you should cover it all. Later we have done it in another way, but that was, so to speak, the first attempt we used for this. And one can say that the first publication of IAMHIST was made before IAMHIST came to the world, because both number 1 from 1976 and number 2 to 3 from July 1977 were both before the official founding of IAMHIST. But, well, to make the statutes, there we really felt some of the inter-European problems. That is how to word statutes. And how you, and there we also learned that in English is enormously rich in, shall we adopt, or pass, or agree upon, or decide, or whatever. This whole palette of ways of saying what we are going to do is very typical for the British. The Germans had quite another tradition, very solid and decisive, but not so flexible. And then there was a Danish tradition. Of course, we have our own tradition, and I don't know how I shall defend it. Something between the German and the British. So we were talking very much about words. But we came out, and I would say that one of those who was insisting the most and got the strongest influence on the exact wording of the first statutes was Nicholas Prony. And Nicholas Prony, of these people here, we were Clive Coulters and myself, I take in alphabetical order, then John Jansen from Utrecht, from Stichting Film and Wetenschap, and also Rolf Schuersma from Stichting Film and Wetenschap. And then Finn Lykkegaard from Denmark, Nicholas Prony from Great Britain, and then Niels Skyum Nielsen. I have to say that the end wording was also influenced by Paul Smith in Southampton and Yvonne Relouf. We had a meeting with them as well at the time. And I think it was Yvonne who proposed the name International Association for Audiovisual Media in Historical Research and Education. And the reason why she did that was that it was important to include education. That we both research and education. One thing which was not covered in the title was the archives. That was, you could say, the third leg. Research, education, but also preservation and indexing and all this. All the archival side of it. And there was another one which only slightly was covered, could be covered under education, and that was production. Because actually we wanted to unite all these fields, everybody coming together, embracing each other, challenging each other. That was the idea. So even the broad name did not cover everything. But I think that perhaps the present name is the best one because it is the most flexible, actually.
It all seemed to me that right from the start there was a sense within the association that it wasn't just about academics with a common interest getting together, but it was there to include practitioners and archivists as well.
Exactly. And that was what we, this idea of a workshop character. For instance, at Brandbjerg, and we were very inspired by this, by this conference because it brought really people together, archivists, practitioners, educationers, researchers, theoreticians, semiotics. Everything came together and was covered by these 66 people who were taking part there. And it was very, very fruitful. That was actually the first time where there in Bamberg, at the conference in 1974 at the Imperial War Museum, there was a Russian participating, Sergei Vladimirovich Droboshenko. And I used the possibility that his interpreter, who was accompanying him all the time, went on the toilet in a pub we were, to talk with him directly in Russian and inviting him to Copenhagen. And inviting him for this conference here. And the reason why I did that was that I had the impression that he was under some sort of control, and I wanted to engage him directly and say, we want a stable research and education cooperation with the Soviet Union, and we want it now. Please come, we make this conference. And then he told me how to write the letters, and that was the start of a fantastic cooperation, which also brought me into the jury in the Moscow Film Festival and other traveling all around the Soviet Union, showing Danish film comedies and talking about them. That was fantastic, and Sergei was a very, very good friend. His contribution here at the Bamberg conference was theoretical. It was text and out of text reality in mass communication system. It is not easy to understand what it is about in this Russian way of expressing itself. But it was very much going into the theory, and he showed himself as a great expert on particular Tsiga-Vertov, and that particular documentary filmmaking, which is, you can always consider how much is fiction, how much is fact in that, but that particular aesthetic high point of filmmaking which developed in the Soviet Union in the 1920s. So there we had United States with Ken Short. He was actually working in Britain, but he was American, and there was Jerry Cool, who was also American working in Britain. And Jerry Cool at this conference was also very decisive. I remember he showed that part of the World at War series, which was about Stalingrad. He showed various sequences of this series. He showed also from The Reckoning, one of the last parts of it. But what impressed us the most regarding the series was his Stalingrad. Because there, he said, and I remember him doing it because when we discussed it, he sat at a table and we were surrounding him. That was a real workshop situation. And he said, yes, there is a question of authenticity. And then we have this famous scene of the Soviet troops who are embracing each other in their winter uniforms. They are performing the encirculation of the German troops. That decisive moment is catched by the camera. It's caught by the camera. But it's a fake. It's a reconstruction. It's made afterwards. If you show it, you show a fake. If you don't show it, something is missing. What to do? And then they say, well, we decided to do the following. The closing of the ring around the Germans happened suddenly during the night. it went too quickly to be filmed. Therefore, the Soviets had to reenact it afterwards so that it could be kept for posterity. And with that particular notion it was shown. And there you tell so much, and that was so rewarding, and I'm a great admirer of Llewella as I would say a television educator in that way, because you shall also show the fakes, as when I was working as a voluntary worker at the Danish Mint Cabinet, the Royal Danish Mint Cabinet, where the National Museum's great collection of coins. And the director there once said to me and to a customer coming, showing a big silver coin, which happened actually to be mostly of copper. It was a fake from the 17th century. And I said to the director, what shall I do with this? The man will be very disappointed, because he thinks that he has really a treasure here in his hands. But it's a fake. And then the director said to the man, when we came out to him, well, this is an excellent copy. And if you will agree to it, we would like to include it in our collection of faked money. Well, that's a way of doing it, because the fakes are also part of history. And Llewella's way of treating it, also when Niels Nielsen made his study of film clips from fictional films used as authentic historical photographs, you deal with the main problem that sometimes, if you show reality, you don't believe it, because you expect that things should look otherwise. Like if you have a general, as you mentioned earlier, that is too young, but the man was too young. But how shall you explain the young general? Better to take an actor who is older, or to make the general a colonel, or something like that. But I think it is a dangerous thing to do. I think that if you have something which is astonishing, you should focus on it. You should not level out according to our prejudices. You will say, look here, this is interesting because it's different. And one of the things I tried to do when I was regularly a television commentator on Balkan news, I tried always to take the angle which others didn't take, and say, yes, please, but look at this as this. Try to see this. That is what is really interesting. Because often you tell the same story with some different pictures. Why not go to different interpretations, or take out some of the pictures which are deselected, which are not chosen? Because the reality is most often much more complex. And our tendency to simplify in order to facilitate. I remember once I was in such a situation where the study host, the interviewer, said, but cannot you explain in that way so that Maren in the dump is able, as we say in Danish, is able to understand it? And I said, I'm not caring about marrying anybody in the dump, because this is not right. And I insisted, and I didn't want to level it out. And afterwards, when I was getting out of the study, one of the technicians in the editing room said to me, that was fine. You got him. And there I felt that you underestimate the ordinary person. You underestimate those people. I've often felt very much gratefulness by people in the shops or others who saw some of the instances where I tried to show something which was not told, and say, thank you for making us aware that you can see it from another side, or that there's another story. And that is some of our important challenges. That is to act against the tendency to level out, to simplify, and to do away with what's really interesting. To making things three-dimensional or four-dimensional things two-dimensional or one-dimensional.
You mentioned Ken Short.
Yes.
I'd like perhaps to talk about some of the personalities involved in the IAMHIST. Ken, of course, was the first editor of the historical journal Film, Radio and Television, which started in 1981. Can you tell us something about the origin of the journal?
Well, we started out with a newsletter. That was, of course, quite provisional and made on A4 and duplicated in the department and sent out by normal mail. That was the customary way of doing it at that time. Then we made our study series, conference publications, which was all typed on electric IBM writers and then rather cheaply publicized, as one can see here. But the idea of making a journal, originally we thought of the journal closing the leap from the newsletter as a very temporary news and the solid conference publications. Between this, you could have the journal. That was the original idea, to work with this idea. But Ken Short, by his alliance with Carfax in Oxford, he raised the journal to something else. And what actually happened was that IAMHIST developed during the 1980s into an organization where the journal became, so to speak, the pivotal part of the publication system or publication venture. So we worked, and originally it was only 3 times a year. Then it developed into a quarterly. If I remember right.
I think it was twice.
Oh, it was twice.
Year. Then it became 3 times in the mid-80s.
Right. Yes,
and then 4.
Yes. So yes, it started out with 2 issues a year, where the newsletter came with 4 issues. Then it went, I think in 85, it went to 3 issues. And then in 88 or 89, I think 88 or 89, we went up to 4 issues. Is it so?
It's round about that.
Yes. And this means that, this tendency, of course, meant that the newsletter was meaning less and less, simply because with the same periodization of the journal and the newsletter, one could bring some things in the journal which earlier had been brought in the newsletter. But the newsletter has, sometimes it was there, sometimes it was discontinued. I think that we only had the newsletter from Copenhagen until 85. Then I moved from one department to another department, and I was stepping down as president in 85, and then it was Willem van Kampen who took over at that time, as we at that time felt. Also, Ken Short stepped down, as far as I remember, as Secretary General at that time, and was, as I don't remember whether it was David Ellwood or who it was who took over from Ken Short. But Ken Short then concentrated to be the editor of the journal. I hope this is relatively correct. And this move was in many ways a good move, because the journal, with that good agreement we had with Carfax, so that we could keep the membership fees low. And it was important to keep them low because we wanted to keep the doors open. And we wanted students to easily engage in it. And you wanted to keep up the contact with them. We felt, at least the majority of us, that the reason why we founded IAMHIST was that it should not be closed academic circles. And I remember when we had the discussion in Göttingen in '73 about the future of the cooperation, international cooperation, and where some of the Germans were rather traditional in their view, and what about all these assistants and assistant professors and so on, and where they would like to make it some sort of doctoranden organization. And at this occasion I protested and said, in these new media we must have the new people in, and we must have a democratic structure, and we must break with the ordinary academic tradition. We are a new field and we shall have new ways. And fortunately, also the Germans complied with it. Why? Well, if I shall think of, there were some of the younger Germans who were very positive in that respect. But I would also say that one of the people I remember from that time, which was very progressive, that was Richard Karlenberg. He was responsible for documentary film at the Film Archive in Copenhagen. A very, very good scholar and wonderful man in many ways. And the whole idea of having young people in catched fire. So that was, and this we then tried to involve in some way in this Brandbjerg conference, where the whole idea was to make something, and they would do it on the Danish folk high school, was also intentional, because in the Danish folk high school tradition, you have no formal grades. You are together, you have no examinations, but you produce a lot and you cooperate a lot, but you have a free education system. So that was actually part of the ideology in which we worked, and the ideology which I'm so glad that it is still there in IAMHIST, because this freedom of thought, independence, only based on merit and independence, on ancestry or on formal qualifications. I think that is so important to keep that idea. That we all are colloquial, that we all meet each other with respect and expect from each other that you can learn something new, also from people who have no formal place in education. And one of the things which I use as an argument for this, also in other connections, also in front of the Research Council, that is that I say some of the best works we have seen have been made by very, very young scholars who have just seen the right things we other couldn't see, because we were biased, we were prejudiced, we were in the habit of seeing things, they could see new things. Like in the famous fairy tale of Hans Christian Andersen, The Clothes of the Emperor, where it is a child who sees he has no clothes, the emperor. So that is some of the things which I think belongs to the value base of IAMHIST.
Shall we pause there while we refresh our beers?
Yes.